And the big story that we are tracking at this hour today is that amid the recent COVID explosion in China, health experts from across the world have estimated close to 100 million COVID cases in China, which may lead to 1 million deaths in the neighboring country. Now, today, 37 million people in China are infected by the virus as per a report, but the Chinese National Health Commission has decided to not release the data on COVID-19 cases, which has left the pharmaceutical companies world over ill-prepared to tackle the surge of the disease. Though the Chinese Foreign Ministry has expanded production of medical supplies amid reports of a shortage of fever and cold drug medicines, the real extent of the spread of coronavirus in China still remains in mystery. While the international health organizations have sought transparency from the Chinese administration, in 20 days of zero COVID policy being diluted in China, 250 million people were infected. Yet the Chinese National Health Commission, which shared COVID data for 3 years during the pandemic, will no longer provide information on the spread of the deadly virus disease without citing any explanation on the change in their policy. And to talk about this entire subject in details, I am joined by China policy expert and former ambassador Anil Trigunath. Appreciate you joining us here, sir, on Christmas on a Sunday. But sir, this is very important to talk about this subject today because there is a COVID explosion that China is witnessing, and India is invariably going to be impacted by it. What happens then when Chinese government takes a conscious decision to block data? They are trying to keep it all wrapped in mystery. The COVID numbers, the extent of the spread of coronavirus, it's all a mystery right now, is because nobody knows what exactly is happening. What do you think is China fearing, and what are they exactly hiding?
Well, thank you, Samia. I must first wish you a very Merry Christmas to you and your viewers. But at the same time, what you mentioned about China is very peculiar of that country. There is no transparency in things that they do, whether their policies, the kind of planning they do, the kind of results that come out. And we have seen in the beginning, 3 years ago, when the pandemic spread, it did spread from there. At that time, also, China took pretty long to even share the data with WHO. And therefore, now that they have stopped publishing any data is not new, for the simple reason that while they are reporting that there have been no deaths or others, they themselves have been in the beginning. If you remember, it was projected through various modeling that if the zero COVID policy was to be removed, there'll be millions of deaths. So China is also stuck between the hard rock and the Dead Sea. So this is a problem for them. They cannot reintroduce zero COVID. So my opinion is that perhaps the government has decided to have this some kind of a hard immunity eventually. Of course, there'll be plenty of deaths, but then they have given up on controlling it in any major way. So it looks like we see in Guangzhou, in Zhejiang, and Hangzhou, Suzhou, different places, the millions of cases are growing by the day, actually reported in different parts. So it is a very difficult situation for the world because this
Right.
China is not going to remain an island. It is going to impact India. It is going to impact other parts of the
Yes.
world. But it depends on the severity of this
It's going to
strain
impact
that
the
I
rest of
mentioned.
the world. And let me take that question across to the other guest of ours who's joining us at this hour is Inar Tangen, who is the chairman of Asia Narratives. Appreciate you joining us. Very good afternoon. So we were just talking about the Chinese explosion of coronavirus, the outbreak that China is witnessing right now. If you could throw us some light as to what is the situation on ground over there, because not a lot of information is coming out, and now the Chinese authorities have decided that they're not going to share their data. Mr. Tangan, please go ahead with your views on it.
Well, I don't think they're going to share. They're not putting out data at the moment. And quite frankly, neither is the United States or anybody else. They're trying to put out death. The US, Europe, also India is basically just putting out death statistics and things like this. China has had a very rapid increase in a very mild variant. And they are still trying to calculate exactly what cases are in fact COVID related, what deaths are COVID related. And when they have that information, I'm sure they will share it with everybody.
But sir, you do realize the fact that the pharma company, the pharmaceutical sector, they are kept in the dark. Like they have to come up with medicines, that production has to increase, and world over, if there is no information about the extent of the COVID spray or the fact that how the virus has mutated, it's not going to help the world over. Do you think that China should try and tweak its policy around to try and share more data to help the world at large that has already witnessed the pandemic?
Well, I don't understand the question from the point of view that the Chinese have their own domestic vaccines. mRNA has, in the process of approval, they've had one of the earliest vaccines, which is responsible for half of the vaccines across the world, and they have a new inhalable vaccine. They're not dependent on pharmaceutical companies from around the world for anything except Paxlovid and some other treatments that are available to people who have severe reactions. So at this time, I do agree that China at some point needs to share information, but they need to make sure that that information is accurate. And at this juncture, they're a little suspicious of why people are jumping to conclusions about what's going on. It's a very mild variant. I'm here in Beijing. I'm talking to people from across China. And so far, although there have been deaths, more than reported so far, I do believe that in the main, it's a very, very mild variant, not like the variants at the very beginning.
Okay, we get your point, sir. And let me take that question back to the other guest who's still with us, Anil Trigunath. So how do you see when Mr. Tangen is saying that it's a mild virus and China should share data, but provided they have accurate data on what they're going to share with the rest of the world? But when it comes to interdependency, or for that matter, the pharma companies and the other countries preparing themselves against the virus, it is still claiming lives. So even if you're calling it to be a case of mild virus, the fact is that the fatalities are still happening.
Well, one thing I agree with Mr. Tengen, and that is that data which should be accurate must be shared. There should be no obfuscation of the data. But data sharing is important for fighting the pandemic in the long run and in the medium run. In the meantime, the China has also, as far as the reports go, changed its policy of reporting the deaths. What is the definition of a COVID-related death or the otherwise? So that has been tweaked also. So one is unlikely to get the exact information, but China is a responsible member of the international community, and as that, WHO has been also expressed regrets about not receiving any data as far as till today morning. So one does not know exactly what is the gain coming out of it. I mean, of course, if their policy is to have the herd immunity, or if they feel that this is not a virus that is potent enough to kill more people, that's well and good. But at the same time, the virus has shown in different parts of the world a problem about its mutation. And when does it mutate? How does it spread? It can have a devastating impact once again on the global economy. And as you mentioned about the interdependence, so it is a major challenge at this stage. And if a country like China, with the 1.4 billion people, gets infected with the way the reports are coming, one does not know the veracity of these reports. But at the same time, these reports clearly indicate that this is a serious challenge and a serious problem. And that is why the Chinese government had followed the zero COVID policy for a long time. However, that failed. And this time, just going all out to the other extreme is also likely to have a much bigger impact for China and the rest of the world.
Well, thank you, Mr. Anil Trigunath, who is an expert on China policy, and also our guest Inar Tangen, who's joining us all the way from Beijing. Sir, we hope you stay safe against the coronavirus in your country, but appreciate both of you gentlemen joining us here at the broadcast as we discuss this